Hey, this is Scott, and today we're going to take a look at the Feiyu-Tech G6 gimbal for action cameras. I'll try and keep this short and sweet and hit on the key points that stood out to me, both positive and negative, but to be fair, I'll say right up front that generally this works very well and it's built very nicely. There are unfortunately a number of features that I couldn't fully test related to how the gimbal can control the camera, because I don't have a GoPro brand action camera. In the menu on the smartphone app where you connect with your camera, you have two choices, GoPro and RXO. Choosing the GoPro option, I could see and connect to my SJ Cam SJ8 Pro, but it wouldn't control anything at all even though it said that it was connected. The status on the LCD screen built into the handle did show though that I was not connected, so the only strange part about that was that the app itself said I had successfully connected when apparently I didn't. If you do have a GoPro or RXO though, it seems that you can control a number of camera settings like mode and resolution, as well as of course stop and start recording. There's a button on the side of the handle which will let you cycle through the settings with a single or a long push, but again, I couldn't actually test this myself. I also really couldn't test the waterproof design because my non-GoPro action camera isn't waterproof without the housing, and the housing is too large to fit into this clamp. I assume there shouldn't be any issues though, judging on the build quality overall. Everything else in terms of my first and overall impressions was very good. Compared with the Feiyu-Tech Vimble 2 smartphone gimbal, the build quality of this was outstanding, and it should be for the price compared to the Vimble. It is compact enough to hold without touching the buttons or the joystick, but it's no larger than necessary and it's solid metal everywhere. The rear motor is at a 45-degree angle, giving a clear view of the screen, which is very nice, and there's a ring around that back motor that you can turn to loosen and adjust the arm to get better balance. The camera mount is also very straightforward in its use. Just slide the camera in and tighten down the screws, placing the camera upside down if you want to retain access to the power button. The screws to tighten down the clamp are incredibly tiny though, and a little bit tricky to tighten effectively, but I never had any issues with the camera coming loose. The arms all feel very sturdy and the motors also feel very smooth, which is a big step up from the other Feiyu-Tech gimbals that I've reviewed, where the arms and the motors felt a little bit soft. One thing to note though is that this does suffer from what I call a jerk pan type movement when you're moving from a forward facing holding angle to straight up, which is an issue for a good number of gimbals, both cheap and expensive, and not only this one. Simply put, when I'm in a standard straight up position, twisting the handle will move the camera side to side in the pan direction, while holding the gimbal straight out at more than a 45-degree angle, naturally pointing the entire gimbal left and right will turn your camera side to side. That's fine and normal, but on some like the Freevision Vilta M or the Moza Mini Me for example, the transition is much smoother and it doesn't ruin your footage. Again, it's a common thing that you probably wouldn't even care about or notice if you didn't know that gimbals that don't behave this way even exist. So just be careful of how you're holding it when you approach a 45-degree angle and you'll be fine. Other than that though, the overall performance of the gimbal seems to be great. The movement is very smooth and you can choose between 3 modes in the app just as you can with their other gimbals for anything from very smooth movement up to faster, more reactive movement. I didn't notice any vibrations or anything unless I held it at an awkward angle where again, most gimbals will fight you a bit. The overall range of movement is really good though. A full 360 degrees in the pan direction and more than enough in the tilt direction, allowing you to simply point the gimbal almost straight down for underslung mode instead of having to flip it over to the side, which is often awkward and annoying. If you go too far, the camera will flip around to face backwards, but the rear motor will show up in your shot way before that point anyway, so there's no need to go that far. Around a downward 45-degree angle seems to be the sweet spot. The button layout is also relatively simple but effective. The modes work the same as any other Feiyu-Tech gimbal, a single push of the mode button to cycle between pan follow and lock modes, and a double tap to jump into full follow mode. Holding the rear trigger will put you in temporary lock mode and double tapping it will bring you back home. In lock mode, I didn't notice any drifting or weirdness either, which is nice. With a main mode button, you can also turn the camera around to point at yourself with 3 taps and go into auto rotation mode with 4 taps. I'll talk a bit about auto rotation mode in just a moment. Finally, 5 taps of that main mode button will let you initialize or calibrate the gimbal by placing it on a flat surface for a few seconds. Once it's finished, indicated by a message on the LCD screen, you can just tap the button once to wake it back up. Last but not least, there's a sliding switch on the rear of the grip above the trigger button which will control your roll axis, letting you get Dutch angles or an Inception type rolling motion. This is nice to have but a little tricky to use depending on your grip, Definitely unlikely to accidentally bump it though, so that's probably a good thing. Going back to the auto rotation mode and consequently the app, which is necessary to set up some settings for the auto rotation mode, I was kind of disappointed, and I have been with the other Feiyu-Tech gimbals as well. In the app, overall, the things that work seem to work fine, such as the remote control, manual horizon calibration, and so on. Things like motor settings and joystick settings are also fairly straightforward, but I found that the app had trouble reading or saving the gimbal's parameters fairly often, and it became a little frustrating. If you've seen or used the auto rotation mode on other Feiyu-Tech gimbals, it's exactly the same. You tap the mode button 4 times to enter that mode, and it will beep to let you know that you've activated it. You manually set your first position and press the button once to set it. Manually set your second position and press the button again to set that. Then the gimbal will go back to the first position and start rotating, but to set up the speed of this rotation, you need to access the Feiyu-On app. First of all, the issue with reading parameters that I mentioned before is very annoying. Sometimes it works, but sometimes it fails and you can't enter that menu, and sometimes I'm honestly not sure if it worked or not. On top of that, the page for setting the auto rotation settings seems to overcomplicate the process. In my mind, the simplest way to set the speed would be to set the full time for the movement. So if you want the result to last about 10 seconds, you can just set 10 seconds in the app. If you're doing a time lapse or something, you probably also know how long the process will take, so you could just enter that time. But instead, you have to choose how long it takes for a full rotation and choose that separately for both axes. So you have to figure out how your range of movement relates to a full turn, and it's just annoying. Anyway, maybe others have had better luck with this mode than I have, but for me, it's overly frustrating and I'd never use it unless I really wanted a motion lapse and I had nothing else to work with. So overall, there are a few things which are less than perfect, but most of them relate to the app, not the gimbal. And they may be minor for most people. Basically, the small screws on the camera clamp, the read and save errors in the app, as well as the auto rotation mode in general, are the extent of what I'm unhappy with, and the rest is absolutely fantastic. There's a great build quality, a simple but very effective button layout, and very nice information screen, solid performance in terms of stability, and a nice carrying case. As a few extra goodies that I haven't mentioned yet, the case lets you put the gimbal in with the camera attached. I'm not sure if that's the reason they made it this way, but there's more than enough space to fit the camera and also an extra battery or two, which I really appreciate. There's a handle on this case as well, and it also has space to store the gimbal battery separately if you want to take it out of the handle. There's no mini tripod included, but the way this balances, it's really easy to stand the gimbal up on its own anyway, and the seller that I got it from also included a nice tripod anyway. There's also a screw mount on the side where you could attach whatever you want, but they advertise using a phone clamp there to use as a monitor or kind of control center in an easy to reach position. The battery life is also pretty good, rated at 12 hours, and you can charge your camera from the gimbal as well. When charging the camera, it will power on and off automatically together with the gimbal, which is convenient if you can't reach the power button. So that's about it. It's not incredibly cheap, but compared to other GoPro gimbals, especially the Splashproof ones, it's very fairly priced and it feels and works great. If you have any questions or comments, let me know down below. If you liked this video or found it helpful, be sure to leave a thumbs up and share it if you'd like. Subscribe to see more in the future, and as always, thank you for watching.